there's an echo. And thanks, Srila Prabhupada, for allowing us to come every week to read to him. So, as we always do, let us offer our humble obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitya Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskachari Shatarane. And to each other, Vanchakalpadurvischa Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Mataji, you're okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, no, you're fine. So this week, Srila Prabhupada, we're reading about Sishupal, chapter 74, the deliverance of Sishupal. King Yudhisthira became happy after hearing the details of the Jarasandha episode, and he spoke as follows: My dear Krishna, O eternal form of bliss and knowledge, all the exalted affairs of this material world, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and King Indra, are always eager to receive and carry out orders from you. And whenever they are fortunate enough to receive such orders, they immediately take them and keep them on their heads. O Krishna, you are unlimited, and although we sometimes think of ourselves as royal kings and rulers of the world and become puffed up over our paltry positions, we are very poor in heart. Actually, we are fit to be punished by you, but the wonder is that instead of punishing us, you so kindly and mercifully accept our orders and carry them out properly.
We all are very much surprised that your Lordship can play the part of an ordinary human being, but we can understand that you are performing these activities just like a dramatic artist. Your real position is always exalted, exactly like that of a sun, which always remains at the same temperature during both the time of its rising and the time of its setting. Although we feel the difference in temperature between the rising and the setting the sun, the temperature of the sun never changes. You are always constantly equipoised, neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material affairs. You are the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead, and for you there are no relatives. My dear Madhav, you are never defeated by anyone. Material, material distinctions, this is me, this is you, this is mine, this is yours, all are conspicuous by dint of their absence in you. Such distinctions are visible in the lives of everyone. Even the animals, but pure devotees, are freed from these false distinctions. Since these distinctions are absent in your devotees, they cannot possibly be present in you.
After satisfying Krishna in this way, King Yudhisthira arranged to perform a Rajasuya sacrifice. He invited all the qualified brahmanas and the sages to take part and appointed them to different positions as priests in charge of sacrificing area. He invited the most expert brahmanas and sages, whose names are as follow: Krishna Divya Pran, Vasudev, Baradev Vraja, Samura, Gautama, Astriya, Vistala, Karminya, Kanva, Mitra, Kavera, Kavesa, Tirtha, Vishwamitra, Vamandev, Smriti, Jamini, Kartu, Pila, Parsura, Garga, Vaiswama, Atya, Kasapya, Durmya, Parsurama, Acharya, Asuri, Vistrusi, Muttu Varsana, and Asuya. Beside all this Brahmana and the sages, he invited such respected old men as Dronacharya, Bhishma, the grandfather of Kaurus, Kripacharya, and Dhritarashtra. He also invited all the sons of Dhritarashtra, headed by Duryodhana, and also the great devotee Vidur, king from the kings from the different part of the world, along with their ministers and secretaries, were also invited to see the great sacrifice performed by King Yudhishthira, and the citizens comprising learned Brahmanas, cleverless Kshatriyas, well-to-do Vaishyas, and faithful Shudras all visited the ceremony.
The Brahmana, priest, and sages in charge of the sacrificial ceremony constructed the sacrificial arena as usual with a plow of gold, and they initiated King Yudhishthira as the performer of the great sacrifice in accordance with Vedic rituals. Long years earlier, when Varun had performed a similar sacrifice, all the sacrificial utensils had been made of gold. Similarly, in the Rajya sacrifice of King Yudhishthira, all the utensils required for the sacrifice were golden.
Present by the invitation of King Yudhishthir to participate in the great sacrifice were all the exalted demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Indra, the king of heaven, accompanied by their associates, as well as the predominating deities of the higher planetary systems, including Gandharvalok, Siddhalok, Janalok, Tapolok, Nagalok, Yakshalok, Rakshasalok, Pakshilok, and Charanalok, as well as famous kings and their queens. All the respectable sages, kings, and demigods who assembled there agreed unanimously that King Yudhishthir was quite competent to take the responsibility of performing the Rajasuya sacrifice. No one was in disagreement on this fact. Everyone thoroughly knew the position of King Yudhishthir because he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. No accomplishment was extraordinary for him. The learned Brahmanas and priests saw to it that the sacrifice by Maharaj Yudhishthir was performed in exactly the same way as it had been in bygone ages by the demigod Varuna. According to the Vedic system, whenever there is an arrangement for sacrifice, the members participating are offered the juice of the Soma plant, which is a kind of life-giving beverage. On the day for extracting the Soma juice, King Yudhishthir very respectfully received the special priest who had been engaged to detect any mistake in the formalities of the sacrificial procedure. The idea is that Vedic mantras must be enunciated perfectly and chanted with the proper accent. If the priests who are engaged in this business commit any mistake, the checker or referee priest immediately corrects the procedure, and thus the ritualistic performances are perfectly executed. Unless perfectly executed, a sacrifice cannot yield the desired result. In this age of Kali, there is no such learned Brahmana or priest available. Therefore, all such sacrifices are forbidden. The only sacrifice recommended in the Shastras is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra.
Another important procedure is that the most exalted personality in the assembly was such a sacrificial ceremony is first offered worship. After all arrangements were made for Yudhishthira's sacrifice, the next consideration was who should be worshipped first in the ceremony. This particular ceremony is called Agra Puja. Agra means first and Puja means worship. This Agra Puja is similar to the election of a president. In the sacrificial assembly, all the members were very exalted. Some proposed to elect one person as the perfect candidate for accepting Agra Puja, and others proposed someone else.
Hare Krishna. When the matter remained undecided, Sahadeva began to speak in favor of Lord Krishna. He said, Lord Krishna, the best amongst the members of the Yadu dynasty and the protector of his devotees, is the most exalted personality in this assembly. Therefore, I think that he should, without any objection, be offered the honor of being worshipped first. Although demigods such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, and many other exalted personalities are present in his assembly, no one can be equal to the or greater than Krishna in terms of time, space, riches, strength, reputation, wisdom, renunciation, or any other consideration. Anything considered an opulence is fully present in Krishna. As an individual soul is the basic principle of the growth of his material body, Krishna is the super soul of this cosmic manifestation. All the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, such as the performance of sacrifices, the offering of oblation into the fire, the chanting of the Vedic hymns, and the practice of mystic yoga, are meant for realizing Krishna. Whether one follows the path of fruitive activities or the path of philosophical speculation, the ultimate destination is Krishna. All bona fide methods of self-realization are meant for understanding Krishna. Ladies and gentlemen, it is superfluous to speak about Krishna without every one of you exalted personalities. Knows the Supreme Brahma, Lord Krishna, for whom there are no material differences between body and soul, between energy and energetic, or between one part of the body and another. Since everyone is part and parcel of Krishna, there is no qualitative difference between Krishna and all living entities. Everything is an emanation of Krishna's energy, material and spiritual. Krishna's energies are like the heat and light of fire. There is no difference between the qualities of heat and the light and the fire itself.
When we have long paragraphs like that, let's split it in half. So that, many readers. Super for you.
Hare Krishna. Also, Krishna do anything he likes with any part of his body. We can execute a particular action with the help of a particular part of our body. But he can do anything and everything with any part of his body. And because his transcendental body is full of knowledge and bliss is eternity. He does not undergo the 6 kinds of material changes: birth, existence, growth, production, dwindling, and vanishing. Unforced by an external energy, he is the supreme cause of the creation, maintenance, and the dissolution of everything that be. By the grace of Krishna only, everyone is engaged in the practice of religion, the development of economic conditions, the satisfaction of the senses, and ultimately the achievement of liberation from material bondage. These 4 principles of progressive life can be executed by the mercy of Krishna only. He should therefore be offered the first worship in this great sacrifice, and no one should disagree. Hare Krishna.
Just as by watering the root of a tree, one automatically waters the branches, twigs, leaves, and flowers, or as by supplying food to the stomach, one automatically nourishes all parts of the body, so by offering the first worship to Krishna, we shall satisfy everyone present in this meeting.
Slower and louder, and remember you're reading to Prabhupada.
Including the great demigods. If anyone is charitably disposed, It will be very good for him to give charity only to Krishna, who is the supersoul of everyone, regardless of his particular body or individual personality. Krishna is present as the supersoul in every living being, and if we can satisfy him, then every living being will automatically be satisfied.
Krishna is present as the super soul in every living being. And if we can satisfy him, then every living being will automatically be satisfied. Then our dear online devotees, they can also capture what we're saying.
Sahadev was fortunate to know of the glories of Krishna, and after describing them in brief, he stopped speaking. After this speech, all the members present in that great sacrificial assembly applauded, confirming his words continuously by saying, "Everything you have said is completely perfect. Everything you have said is completely perfect." King Yudhishthira, after hearing the confirmation by all present, especially by the Brahmanas and learned sages, worshipped Lord Krishna according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. First of all, King Yudhishthira, along with his brothers, wives, children, other relatives, and ministers, washed the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and sprinkled the water on their heads. After this, he offered Lord Krishna various kinds of yellow silken garments and presented heaps of jewelry and ornaments before him for his use.
King Yudhishthir felt such ecstasy by honoring Krishna, his only lovable object, that tears glided down from his eyes. And although he wanted to see Lord Krishna, he could not see him very well. When Lord Krishna was thus worshipped by King Yudhishthir, all the members present in the assembly stood up with folded hands and began to chant, "Jai, Jai, Namaha, Namaha." All joined together to offer their respectful obeisances to Krishna, and there were showers of flowers from the sky.
In that meeting, King Shishupal was also present. He was an avowed enemy of Krishna for many reasons, especially because of Krishna's having stolen Rukmani from his intended marriage ceremony. Therefore, he could not tolerate such honoring of Krishna and glorification of his qualities. Instead of being happy to hear the glories of the Lord, he became very angry. When everyone offered respect to Krishna by standing up, Shishupal remained in his seat. But as he became angrier at Krishna's honor, he stood up suddenly, raised his hand, and spoke very strongly and fearlessly against Lord Krishna in such a way that Lord Krishna could hear him distinctly.
There he goes. 91, 92.
Jai Prabhupada. Ladies and gentlemen, I can appreciate now the statement of the Vedas that after all, time is the predominating factor. In spite of all endeavors to the contrary, the time element executes its own plan without opposition. For example, one may try his best to live, but when the time for death comes, no one can check it. I see here that although many stalwart personalities are present in this assembly, the influence of time is so strong that they have been misled by the statement of a boy who has foolishly spoken about Krishna. Many learned sages and elder persons are present, but still they have accepted the statement of a foolish boy. This means that by the influence of time, even the intelligence of such honored persons as those present in this meeting can be misdirected. I fully agree with the respectable persons present here that they are competent to select the personality who can be worshipped first. But I cannot agree with the statement of a boy like Sahadeva, who has spoken so highly about Krishna and has recommended that Krishna is fit to accept the first worship in the sacrifice.
I can see that in this meeting there are many personalities who have undergone great austerities, who are highly learned, and who have performed many penances. By their knowledge and direction, they can deliver many persons who are suffering from the pangs of material existence. There are great rishis here whose knowledge has no bounds, as well as many self-realized persons and brahmanas also. And therefore, I think that any one of them are worshipable, even by the great demigods, kings, and emperors. I cannot understand how you have selected this cowherd boy, Krishna, and have left aside all these great personalities. I think Krishna to be no better than a crow. How can he be fit to accept the first worship in this great sacrifice?
We cannot even ascertain which caste this Krishna belongs to or what his actual occupational duty is. Actually, Krishna does not belong to any caste, nor does he have to perform any occupational duty. It is stated in the Vedas that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do as his prescribed duty. Whatever has to be done on his behalf is executed by his different energies. Shishupala continued, Krishna does not belong to a high family. He is so independent that no one knows his principle of religious life. Indeed, it appears that he is outside the jurisdiction of all religious principles. He always acts independently, not caring for the Vedic injunctions and regulative principles. Therefore, he is devoid of all good qualities. Shishupal indirectly praised Krishna by saying that he is not within the jurisdiction of Vedic injunctions. This is true because he is Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he has no good qualities, Gunayana Hina, means that Krishna has no material qualities, and because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he acts independently, not caring for conventions in the social or religious principles.
Shishupal continued, under this circumstance, how can he be fit to accept the first worship in the sacrifice? Krishna is so foolish that he has left Mathura, which is inhabited by the highly elevated persons following the Vedic culture, and has taken shelter in the ocean where there is not even a talk of a Vedic. Instead of living openly, he have constructed a fort within the water and is living in the place where there is no dissolution of the Vedic knowledge. When he comes out of the fort, he is simply harries the citizen like the dacoit, thief, or rogues.
Shishupal went crazy because of Krishna's being elected the supreme, first worshipped person in that meeting, and he spoke so irresponsibly that it appeared he had lost all his good fortune. Being overcast with misfortune, Shishupal continued to insult Krishna, and Lord Krishna patiently heard him without protest. just as a lion does not care when a flock of jackals howl. Lord Krishna remained silent and unprovoked. Krishna did not reply to even a single accusation made by Shishupal, but all the members present in the meeting, except for a few who agreed with Shishupal, were very much agitated because it is the duty of any respectable person not to tolerate blasphemy against God or his devotee. Some of them who thought that they could not properly take action against Shishupal left the assembly in protest, covering their ears with their hands in order not to hear further accusations. Thus, they left the meeting condemning the action of Shishupal. It is the Vedic injunction that whenever there is a blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must immediately leave. If he does not to do so, he becomes bereft of his pious activities and is pious activities and is degraded to a lower condition of life.
All the kings present belonging to the Kuru dynasty, Matsya dynasty, Kekaya dynasty, and Srinjaya dynasty were very angry and immediately took up their swords and shields to kill Shishupal, who was so foolish that he was not even slightly agitated, although all the kings present were ready to kill him. Shishupal did not care to think of the pros and cons of his foolish talking, and instead of stopping when he saw that all the kings were ready to kill him, he stood to fight with them and took up his sword and shield. When Lord Krishna saw that they were going to fight in the arena of the auspicious Rajasuya Yajna, he personally pacified them. Out of his causeless mercy, he himself decided to kill Shishupal. When Shishupal was abusing the kings who were about to attack him, Lord Krishna took up his disc as sharp as the blade of a razor and immediately separated Shishupal's head from his body.
Hare Krishna. When Shishupala was thus killed, a great roar and howl went up from the crowd. Taking advantage of that disturbance, the few kings who were supporters of Shishupala quickly left the assembly, out of fear for their lives. Then the fortunate Shishupal's spirit soul immediately merged into the body of Lord Krishna in the presence of all, exactly as a burning matter falls to the surface of the globe. The merging of Shishupal's soul into the transcendental body of Krishna reminds us of the story of Jaya and Vijaya, who fell to the material world from the Vaikuntha planets upon being cursed by the four Kumaras. For their return to the Vaikuntha world, it was arranged that both Jaya and Vijaya, for 3 consecutive births, would act as deadly enemies of the Lord, and that at the end of these lives they would return to the Vaikuntha world and serve the Lord as his associates.
Although Sisupala acted as the enemy of Lord Krishna, he was not for a single moment out of Krishna consciousness. He was always absorbed in thought of Krishna, and thus he first got the salvation of Sayujya Mukti, merging into the existence of the Supreme, and was finally reinstated in his original position of personal service. The Bhagavad Gita corroborates the fact that one who absorbed in thought of Supreme Lord at the time of death immediately enters the kingdom of God after quitting his material body. After the salvation of Sisupala, King Yudhishthira rewarded all the members present in the sacrificial assembly. He generously remunerated the priests and learned sages for their engagement in the execution of the sacrifice. And after the performing all his routine work, he took his bath. This bath at the end of sacrifice is also technical. It is called the abhrita bath.
Lord Krishna thus enabled the performance of the Rajasuya Yajna arranged by King Yudhishthira to be successfully completed. And being requested by his cousins and relatives, he remained in Hastinapur for a few months more. Although King Yudhishthira and his brothers were unwillingly to have Lord Krishna leave Hastinapur, Krishna arranged to take permission from the king to return to Dwarka, and thus he returned home along with his queens and ministers.
The story of the fall of Jaya and Vijaya from the Vaikuntha planets to the material world is described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The killing of Shishupala has a direct link with that narration of Jaya and Vijaya, but the most important instruction we get from this incident is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being absolute, can give salvation to everyone, whether one acts as his enemy or as his friend. It is therefore a misconception that the Lord acts with someone in relationship of friend and with someone else in the relationship of enemy. His being an enemy or friend is always on the absolute platform. There is no material distinction.
After King Yudhishthira took his bath at the conclusion of the sacrifice and stood in the midst of all the learned sages and brahmanas, he seemed exactly like the king of heaven and thus looked very beautiful. King Yudhishthira generously rewarded all the demigods who participated in the yajna, and being greatly satisfied, all of them left praising the king's activities and glorifying Lord Krishna. When Sukadev Goswami narrated these incidents of Krishna's killing Shishupal and described the successful execution of the Rajasuya Yajna by Maharaj Yudhishthira, he also pointed out that after the successful termination of the Yajna, only one person was unhappy. He was Duryodhana. Duryodhana by nature was very envious because of his sinful life, and he appeared in the dynasty of the Kurus like a chronic disease personified to destroy the whole family.
Shukadev Goswami assured Maharaj Parikshit that the pastimes of Lord Krishna, the killing of Shishupal and Jarasandh, and the releasing of the imprisoned kings are all transcendental vibrations, and that anyone who hears these narrations from authorized persons will immediately be freed from all the reactions of the sinful activities of his life. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 74th chapter of Krishna, the deliverance of Shishupal. Chapter 75. Why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice. King Yudhishthira was known as Ajat Shatru, or a person who had no enemy. Therefore, when all the men, demigods, kings, sages, and saints saw the successful termination of the Rajasuya Yajna performed by King Yudhishthira, they were very happy. That Duryodhana alone was unhappy was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Shukadev Goswami to explain this.
Sukdev Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, your grandfather King Yudhishthir was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone to be his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajatasattu, one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of the Kuru dynasty in taking charge of different departments for the management of the Rajasuya sacrifice. For example, Bhishmasena was put in charge of the kitchen department, Duryodhana in charge of the treasury department, Sahadeva in charge of the reception department, Nakula in charge of the supply department, and Arjuna in charge of looking after the comforts of the elder persons. The most astonishing feature was that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. The queen, the goddess of fortune, Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food, and because Karna was famous for giving charity, he was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Santardana, and Bhurisrava, the son of Bahalika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rajasuya sacrifice. They were all so bound in loving affection for King Yudhishthir that they simply wanted to please him.
After Sisupal died, by the mercy of Lord Krishna, and merged into the spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rajasuya Yagya, when all the friends, guests, and well-wishers had been fully honored and rewarded, King Yudhishthir went to bathe in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapura stands today on the bank of the Yamuna, and the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that King Yudhishthira went to bathe in the Ganges indicate, therefore, that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Yamuna was also known as the Ganges. While the king was taking the Avabrita Bhat, different musical instruments vibrated, such as mridangas, conch shells, panaba drums, kettle drums, and bugles, and the ankle bells of the dancing girls jingled. Many groups. Where are this one?
Many groups of professional singers sang as venas, flutes, gongs, and cymbals were played, and thus a tumultuous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms like Srinjaya, Cambodia, Kuru, Kekaya, and Koshala were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses, and soldiers. All of them passed in a procession with King Yudhishthir in the forefront. The executive members who had performed the sacrifice, the priests, religious ministers, and brahmanas, all loudly chanted the Vedic hymns. The demigods and the inhabitants of Pitraloka and Gandharvaloka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur or Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scents and floral oils, were nicely dressed in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments. Enjoying the ceremony, they threw on one another liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they enjoyed the occasion. The professional prostitutes jubilantly smeared these liquid substances on the bodies of the men and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow.
In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigods had come in different airplanes and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of royal family, gorgeously decorated and surrounded by bodyguards, arrived on different palanquins. During this time, Lord Krishna, the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, and his special friend Arjuna were both throwing the liquid substances on the bodies of the queens. The queens became bashful, but at the same time, their beautiful smiling brightened their faces. Because of the liquids thrown on their bodies, the saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breasts and their waists, became partially visible because of wet cloth. The queens brought buckets of the same liquid substances and with syringes sprinkled them on the bodies of their brothers in laws. As they engaged in such jubilant activities, their hair fell and loose, and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the queens were thus engaged in these jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in heart were agitated by lustful desires. In other words, such behavior between pure males and females is enjoyable, but it makes persons who are materially contaminated become lustful.
King Yudhishthir, in gorgeous chariot, yoked to excellent horses, was present there along with his queens, including Draupadi, and their features were so beautiful that it appeared as if the great Rasura sacrifice were standing there in person, along with the different functions of sacrifice. Following the Rasura sacrifice, there was a Vedic ritualistic duty known as the Patni Swayamyaja, the sacrifice which one performs along with one's wife, was also duly conducted by the priest of the King Yudhishthir. As the Queen Draupadi and the King Yudhishthir were taking their Abhyat bath, the citizens of Hastinapur as well as the demigods began to beat the drums and follow the trumpets out of feeling happiness, and there was showers of flowers from the sky when the king and the queen finished their bath in the Ganges. All the other citizens, consisting of all the varnas or the castes, the Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Shudra, took their bath in the Ganges. Bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literature because by such bathing one is freed from all sinful reaction. This is still current in India, especially particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges.
After taking his bath, King Yudhishthira dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapped and decorated himself with valuable jewelry. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and others who had participated in the yajna. In this way, he worshipped them all. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family's members, his relatives, his well wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayan, he knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers endeavor to see everyone as God is an artificial attempt at oneness. But a Vaishnava or a devotee of Lord Narayan she is every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform, as one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part because they all belong to the same body. A Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal because in both he sees the soul and the supreme soul seated together.
When everyone was refreshed after bathing and was dressed in silken clothing with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, they looked altogether like the demigods from heaven. This was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed. Each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling, with spots of tilak and curling hair scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive.
Those persons who had participated in the Rajasuya sacrifice, including the most cultured priest, the Brahmanas who had assisted, the citizen of the all Varnas and the king's demigod, sages, saints, and citizen of Pitraloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhishthira, and at the end of happily departed for their sacrifice residences. While returning to their homes, they talked of the dealing of King Yudhishthira, and even after continuous talk of this greatness, they were not satiated. Just as one may drink nectar over and over again and never be satisfied. After the departure of all the others, Maharaj Yudhishthira restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna, not allowing them to leave. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of the king. Krishna therefore sent back all the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, Samba and others. All of them returned to Dwaraka, and Lord Krishna personally remained to give them pleasure to the king.
In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled. But one is never able to fulfill his desires to his full satisfaction. But King Yudhishthira, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice. From the description of the Rajasuya Yagya, such a function appears to be a great ocean of opulent desires. Such an ocean is not possible for an ordinary man to cross. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, King Yudhishthira was able to cross it very easily, and thus he became freed from all anxieties.
When Duryodhan saw that Maharaj Yudhishthir had become very famous after performing the Rajasuya Yagya and was fully satisfied in every respect, he began to burn with the fire of envy, because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Maya for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship and was befitting the position of a great princess, kings, or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members, and Queen Draupadi served her husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens, with their heavy breasts and thin waists, moved within the palace, and the ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom. Because a portion of their breasts was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared reddish. With their beautiful earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very attractive. After seeing such beauties in the palace of King Yudhishthir, Duryodhana was envious. He was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and along with other princes, he had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but he had failed to achieve her.
Once upon a time, King Yudhishthir was sitting on his golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as his great well-wisher Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were present, and the material opulence of King Yudhishthir seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When he was sitting on the throne surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering prayers to him in the form of nice songs, Duryodhan came to the palace with his younger brothers. Duryodhan was decorated with a helmet, and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore, on a slight provocation, he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhan was illusioned by this craftsmanship, and when crossing water, thinking it to be land, he fell in.
When Duryodhan, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhishthir could understand the feelings of Duryodhan, and he tried to restrain the queens. But Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhishthir should not restrain them from enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhan be fooled in that way and that all of them enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhan felt very insulted, and his bodily hairs stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace, bowing his head. He was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhan left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhishthir also was very sorry. But despite all these occurrences, Krishna was silent. He did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhan had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the 2 sects of the Kuru dynasty. This appeared to be a part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Sukdev Goswami why Duryodhan was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Sukdev Goswami. Thus ends the
King Pariksit had inquired from Sukadeva Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Sukadeva Goswami. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 75th chapter of Krishna, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice.
So we're still 5 minutes until 5:30, but Daiva Shakti will be giving the Lilamrita class at 5:30 in the conference room. And plus, we like to end at the end of the chapter so we don't stop in the beginning of a new chapter. So we'd like to thank all our online devotees for following along with us. You can note the subtitles at the bottom of the screen. That helps you to follow along. And as always, let us offer our respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and thank him for allowing us to come read to him. Namo Om Vishnuvedaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarane. And to each other, Vancha Kalpadrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Jai Krishna Bhakt, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Gauda Bhakta Vrinda.